All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. We've already had two major announcements in the race for Congressman Jim Banks' seat. State Senator Andy Zay and Judge Wendy Davis both have entered the Republican primary for the Northeast Indiana's seat in Congress. They both stopped by our studios to talk to our government reporter Garrett Berquist, and we begin with State Senator Andy Zay.
With us now is State Senator Andy Zay. Thank you for dropping by today.
Hey, happy to be with you.
So why are you running for Congress?
I've had a lot of great experience in the Indiana General Assembly the last 7 years, learning to navigate the bureaucracy and serve constituents is a key part of that. And that element is critically important at the national level, whether it's working with veterans and helping them with Veterans Affairs issues, Social Security for our elderly, or economic development issues, supporting our state and supporting our local entities. So I think those are the critical areas. But beyond that, look at where we're at right now. Every day we're hearing about another bank failure. America simply isn't serious about balancing their checkbook. We need serious legislators to go out and handle these issues that have the experience of working in the Indiana General Assembly as a good backdrop, and I think that parlays very well into serving the 3rd District in Indiana.
Would you vote for a nationwide abortion ban?
Yes, sir.
Would there be any exceptions to that?
I voted for an exception in the Indiana State House for Life of the Mother only exception. I signed that pledge with the Indiana Right to Life, and I hold firm to that. I think building a culture of life in Indiana and throughout our nation is a very positive step forward that all Americans can get behind, and certainly all the residents of the 3rd District. And I think we should be proud of that culture of life, and of course we should protect the mother in any instances.
What about instances where the child was conceived due to rape or incest?
Those are exceptions we also debated, and we'll have to work through those as we move forward. And certainly not only voting on life and talking about these exceptions as we are now is important, but it's supporting the mothers and supporting the children as they are born.
You said Congress has to make tax cuts a priority. Why reduce revenue and thus increase the deficit if meaningful spending cuts haven't materialized?
Well, I think tax cuts are critical. I mean, a government that works for the people is a government where the people control the money. Right now in Washington, it's not a revenue problem, it's simply a spending problem. We need to prioritize, we need to look at how money's being spent. And as I've seen through the committees in the Indiana General Assembly and in the Senate, there are just trillions of dollars being poured throughout our country. I mean, what used to be maybe thousands or millions is now billions of dollars on different pieces of legislation that we're looking at in the Senate and in the Senate committees, that those that have access and those that have connections are able to access. But the problem with that is Main Street. There's no consideration of Main Street in that, and simply Main Street needs to be protected, and that's where tax cuts are vital.
You've worked on energy-related issues in each of the past 2 legislative sessions, including legislation on small modular reactors. Do you plan to do something similar on the federal level if you're elected?
Absolutely. I've served on the Utilities and Commerce Committee for about 4 or 5 years now. We've looked at lots of different opportunities as we've balanced the needs for the energy supply here in the state of Indiana and being more clean and more efficient and effective going forward. The small modular nuclear reactors is a great example of one idea that I really think we should advance going forward. And the reason is this. The concept of small modular nuclear reactors is not a new concept. It's tested technology, it's tested opportunity that we should be embracing here in Indiana. That technology goes back 50, 60 years with the Navy and nuclear submarines and those kinds of things, and bringing those opportunities to communities to provide clean, reliable, and affordable electricity is simply what we need in Indiana. We used to be a state where we were in the top 10 in affordability and the cost of electricity, and we're now down in the 30s. So we've got to change that trajectory here in Indiana.
How should Congress approach aid to Ukraine and containing Vladimir Putin's Russia?
I think one thing we need to be very strategic about is making sure we're providing supplies and providing military assets that can help the Ukrainians. I'm not certain what the cash side of that would provide, and I think there's big concerns about simply dumping cash into Ukraine. The assets and the material that can help the citizens of Ukraine, I think, are critically important.
What's one issue that's not in the headlines that's not getting enough attention right now in Washington?
Well, you touched on it, and I would go back to it, and that's simply energy. We have energy systems in our RTOs that are on the cusp of, being stressed, where our industries that we're bringing here to the state of Indiana do not have the electricity they need. They're being asked to shut down. They're being pushed into contracts, which is forcing them to shut down at different times, and many times at great cost. It's costing those industries millions of dollars, either in equipment failures that come from those quick shutdowns or in lost production because they're not able to keep a shift going. And as I mentioned, we're going, Indiana's going the wrong way. We were in affordability, we were in the top 10, and we're now at 36. The United States of America needs an energy policy that works. We can't just rain out trillions of dollars across our country and decide whether it's going to be battery technology, whether it's going to be hydrogen technology, whether we can make our current technologies more efficient in regards to energy. We need to be secure. We need to be creating our own energy here in America and be self-sufficient.
What do you believe sets you apart from the rest of the Republican field, either the candidates who have already gotten in or the candidates who might jump in at a later time?
Easy experience. What I have gone through and what we have negotiated and what we have worked on in the General Assembly, and where I have stood up and championed the values of the Republican Party, conservative values of life, Second Amendment, cutting taxes. We're on the cusp of having Indiana being the lowest income tax state in the United States of America, of those states that have taxes. And that will be coming into measure in the next few years. I couldn't be prouder of that record. I couldn't be more proud of myself in the fight I fought for Main Street America and for Hoosiers.
All right, coming up, we hear from the other major Republican candidate in the race so far, Judge Wendy Davis. Welcome back. Our coverage of the primary for Congressman Jim Banks' seat continues now with Judge Wendy Davis. She's the other major Republican to enter the race so far.
With us now is Judge Wendy Davis. Thank you for dropping by today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Why are you running for Congress?
Great question. I get that a lot. I have been on the bench 12 plus years now, and all of these concerning issues that we see happening in America have now seeped into my courtroom. And as a judge, we can't be political, so that's why I have to step away from the bench to run. But I've reacted to problems. That's what we do as judges. Criminal justice system, family issues, immigration issues, the fentanyl crisis. I can only react. And I've made it a priority to try to tackle the fentanyl crisis in my courtroom by having 3 problem-solving courts. So I'm done reacting to the problem. I think the problems have gotten so big in America with the border crisis, immigration, struggling families, the economy, that it is my time to step away from the bench and stop reacting to problems and be proactive and now go out with a conservative voice for Northeast Indiana.
You mentioned the fentanyl crisis, and your campaign website delves into that a certain amount as well. Is it time to shift our focus when it comes to drugs away from enforcement and toward treatment?
I've been very proud of and made it a priority to bring treatment to Northeast Indiana. I shepherded a bill years ago with other law enforcement that brought some inpatient treatment to the fentanyl crisis, inpatient treatment to those that are getting arrested for possession of a narcotic drug, possession of methamphetamine. So now when they get arrested for those felonies, we do have a place that I can, even if I remand them for their own safety, because I don't want them to keep using fentanyl, I can release them to treatment, and they go into my problem-solving courts. And I see them every day. I keep track of their treatment. And so I really think we need to separate out the dealers from the addicts, and those addicts, a lot of them struggle with mental health and addiction. Those are the individuals we need to focus on treatment.
The first sentence on the issues section of your campaign website ends with, "Wendy's not afraid to fight for our Christian conservative Hoosier values." Do you believe Congress should set public policy based on one religion's belief system?
Well, I am unapologetically a Christian that believes in the Lord Jesus Christ. So I am passionate about the issues in America, and I do think that we need strong conservative policies that are in America. That's the America I grew up in. So I grew up in a really strong America, and I want to bring back that strong America that I grew up in. That doesn't mean go backwards with race issues or discrimination. I mean strong economy. When Ronald Reagan was the president, we had a really strong economy. When Ronald Reagan was president, he won the Cold War against Russia without firing a single shot, which I'm very passionate about the China issue right now.
Would you vote for a nationwide abortion ban?
Well, first of all, the Supreme Court has already taken that away from the federal government. So right now, it's in the hands of the states. So I agree with when the Dobbs decision came out, I agree with not federalizing that issue. I am I'm pro-life. I think every life is precious, and we need to preserve that life. I am unabashedly pro-life, but I do believe what the Supreme Court did by putting it back to the states and let the states themselves decide.
So just to be clear, you don't believe Congress should weigh in one way or another on that issue?
I am a judge, or I have been a judge, and I respect the Supreme Court and their authority. You know, there's separation of powers, and so that's what our Constitution says, separation of powers. And what the Supreme Court has done is now separated that power, taken it away from the federal government, and brought it back to the states. So I respect what the Supreme Court does. It's their power to do that.
How should Congress approach aid to Ukraine and countering Vladimir Putin's Russia?
We cannot deplete our own army. However, I do believe that we continue to fight for Ukraine, and here's why. If Russia takes over Ukraine, that's going to be a sign for China to go right after Taiwan. And if China goes after Taiwan, why wouldn't Russia then seep into Poland? We have got to make sure the strong America that I grew up in, Russia would have never thought about attacking Ukraine. They would have never thought, but America has stood by and become such a weak nation nationally that Russia felt that they could just march into Ukraine and do whatever they want. So we have got to concentrate on our own national security while keeping our NATO alliances strong and ensuring Russia does not win this war.
What's one issue that is not in the headlines that you think is not getting enough attention in Washington right now?
Balancing our national budget. I mean, all of us as Indiana families, I have to balance my budget. My husband and I balance our budget every year. We have to. The national government cannot balance that budget, and we have got to get that done. I have said this, I would be committed to trying to get a bill on that floor every single year to balance the budget. Whether it passes or not, we are needlessly spending in Washington, D.C.
What do you believe sets you apart from the rest of the Republican field in this primary, both the candidates that have already declared and candidates that might potentially declare over the next year?
I have been a leader on the bench for the last 12 plus years. The Supreme Court has appointed me to a lot of judicial committees. I was even the chair of the statewide probation committee. I've shown leadership. I've brought leadership to the circuit court bench. I've brought programs and policies, not policies, programs to the bench that have helped people.
All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team tackles Donald Trump's legal issues, the primary for Jim Banks' seat, and much more. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Kip Tu and Republican Tom John. Let's begin with the Manhattan grand jury, gentlemen. They're potentially voting to indict former President Donald Trump. This is the case involving alleged hush money payments to cover up an extramarital affair. Tom, would be criminally charged help or hurt Donald Trump in the primary, in your opinion?
I don't think it necessarily helps or hurts him at the end of the day. The fact is, I mean, we've all heard him say he could shoot somebody on the streets of Manhattan and have no impact. And the fact is, he does have some followers that seem to feel that way. It's certainly not going to help him in the general. I think his bigger issues are yet to come with some of the other cases that could come to fruition. But right now, I think this is mostly the media looking for things to talk about. And certainly there's been a lot of buzz. And then obviously Donald Trump thinks it helps him because he's been stoking the fire with it.
Kip, I want to get your reaction. As you know, there's nothing in the Constitution that says someone facing criminal charges is ineligible to serve as president. Are Democrats maybe pinning too many of their political hopes on potential indictments against Trump?
No, I don't think that that's the case. I think that just his general behavior, aside from his indictments, we beat him the last time, we'll beat him this time. What I want to say about it, though, is I think it's absolutely disgusting that he's again inciting violence. He said, on Friday morning early that death and destruction will come if he's indicted. And I'd like to remind anybody thinking about that or reacting to that, when John Edwards, who was a presidential candidate on the Democratic side and vice presidential nominee on the Democratic side, was indicted for almost precisely the same thing. There was no cause for violence. There was not a single Democrat in the United States that said this prosecutor is acting political. So I think we need to calm down and let the prosecutors do their job.
All right, back here stateside, gentlemen, we already have two major Republican candidates for Congressman Jim Banks' seat in the northeastern part of the state. We heard from them earlier in the show. Kip, this is a safe Republican seat, as you very well know, but it's open. So how do Democrats maximize their chances of maybe flipping this seat?
Well, it certainly leads pretty heavily Republican. I don't want to call anything safe in the current environment. I mean, if we did have a president nominee from the Republican Party that's under 3 indictments and has continued to devolve his rhetoric, who knows what happens? Things change pretty quickly in politics. It wasn't that long ago that Indiana voted for a Democrat for president, that we had a Democratic nominee for Congress in the 3rd district. So things tend to change. We'll just have to see how quickly they change, and we have to have somebody that's ready to run a good campaign up there in case things do change.
Tom, are you surprised they're jumping in this early? I mean, what does this say about the importance of this seat?
I'm not surprised. In fact, honestly, it's a good decision on both their parts. The earlier you get in, the more you establish yourself, the better off you are. You've got a couple of people who are known political quantities in their parts of the district, right? A sitting state senator, a well-respected judge, but they both have other parts of the district they aren't as well known. They need time to go out and introduce themselves. And so, if I was advising them, I'd say get in early and make sure you establish yourself. And it looks like both of them are doing that. And, as far as the Democrats getting elected, I think the best way for a Democrat to get elected in the 3rd district is become a Republican.
All right, well, we'll see what happens there. I doubt that's going to happen, but we'll see. This past week, as you very well know, state lawmakers in both chambers advanced 2 bills focusing on transgender youth. One bans gender transition treatment for minors. The other requires teachers to notify parents if a student wants to change their pronouns. We've seen similar legislation in Republican-led states all over the country. Tom, why are Republicans so focused on this issue?
Well, they're hearing from members of their communities about concerns, and these are obviously tricky issues that have a lot of different viewpoints attached to them. And I think as you've seen through the session so far, you started with 20 bills, you're down to 5. What actually even happens at the end of the day? It's the process of debate that happens at the legislature. And when you've got different constituencies, whether it be people, parents, or whether it be people who are parents of trans kids, they're all having the conversations. We'll see what comes out of it. So I think right now it's wait and see what comes out of it.
Kip, I'll let you react.
Well, nothing's more depressing to me as I spend my time over in the legislature that we're dealing with these issues. The most vulnerable people in our society really are these trans folks. They have to deal with bullying. They have to deal with all kind of problems with other people who don't agree with who they are. They should be free from who they are. It doesn't affect anybody else. All you do is just hurting them, and it's really, frankly, disgusting. I've sat through all the hearings. When you hear from the parents of children who have gone through transition and the anguish that they went through to make those decisions, I don't understand how anybody can vote the way they're voting after they hear how hard it was for the parents and the anguish that the kids had to go through.
I have 30 seconds left.
There's no surgeries being undertaken under 18.
30 seconds left. I want to get you both in here. A yes or no. if these bills make their way to Governor Holcomb's desk, does he sign them? Kip?
I'm hopeful he's going to veto them.
Tom?
I don't know, to be honest, but given past things, he may well veto them.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, good to see you. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for taking some time. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll be right back.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. You can also find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network over at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.